Hey everybody,
Hey!
it's Q&A time. Scott Edwards is here at long last. I know everybody missed him, but this is the CUI Hotline Q&A. We do it every Friday. We got all kinds of stuff on the YouTube channel and all the various channels now. We got podcasts. Daniel, you got a podcast. Jacob Hill's stuff is going to be on there soon. We got live Q&A on Fridays. Make sure you like and subscribe because we got
everybody has a podcast.
You get a podcast. You get a podcast.
Everybody look under your seats. We got programming for everybody every night of the week. You can check us out at cuihotline.org. There's a phone number, a real working phone number that you can call, and you can leave your questions there. There's a form that you can fill out, and you can put your questions there. We got stuff that's queued up from last week. We got stuff from DMs. We got stuff from Reddit. We got breaking news. Things are working, things aren't working. It's super duper fun. But we do it every week, and we're glad that everybody's here. So, Scott, you're here. You've been out and about, running the biggest MSP that services companies in the div, as far as I can tell by like portfolio. So you definitely know what you're talking about. But today is a special day. We always start out with week in review, but you have 17 whole years to review because it's it's Summit 7's birthday today.
Yeah, it is Summit 7's birthday. June 6, 2008 is when we decided to kick this thing off, and it's been a crazy run. Lots of people. I think I looked at our employee numbers, and I think we're just over 500 now on the employee numbers. So about 500 people have contributed in some way to what we are today, and thankful to every single one of them for what they brought to the table. So it's been a crazy run. I did a post on LinkedIn this morning about it. Thanking various people that have been involved. Bill English, Todd Bleeker, Ben Curry, Amy, Jason and Kurt coming in a little bit after we got started, but it's been a great run, and we've got more to go. So we're just
more in the
started.
tank.
Summit 7 was like 12 people forever, and then now it's hundreds of people. I mean, did you imagine when you guys were a garage band scrappy startup that you would be a titan in the dib like this one day? Yeah. Is that what you guys thought?
Yeah, we're now on what I call Summit 7 3.0. 1.0 was kind of.
Oh my God, you guys have a 3.0 too?
Yeah. And so, Summit 7 1.0 was kind of when we were doing SharePoint consulting, professional services work, project-based work. And that was basically 2008 to 2016. And then 2016, 2017, we started what I would call Summit 7 2.0. Which was our 100% pivot into the DIB and security and compliance. And then when we brought in our partners at Westview back in 22, I really kind of call that Summit 7 3.0. So that's what we're on now. And it's been a heck of a run. So lots of fun and lots of hard work, tears, cheers, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. June 6, 2008, I was sitting in Mandarin class at the Defense Language Institute, literally learning Chinese. So
wow,
it's crazy. It's crazy how stuff plays out. Someone who's been here for almost 17 years, it feels like. Daniel, you've been here forever, man.
Since 2008, October 2018 is when Scott brought me aboard. After a lovely breakfast, he decided he wanted to hire me. So here I am.
There you go. Well, hey, we always do weekend review, and you're out there interfacing with probably more companies on a daily basis than anybody that I know. So what's on your mind this week?
Yeah, so this week's been interesting. I've talked to two different examples of shared service organizations. So one being private equity, right? They've got a holding company and a lot of operating companies that they're trying to solve CMMC for. And then the other one, somewhat similar model, but they're a little bit different. A lot of Native American, Alaskan Native-owned organizations that aren't building up their portfolio to sell it. They're building up and incubating a bunch of set-aside businesses, right? They have no intention of spinning them off. Whereas the holding company and the opco, that model, they're actually looking to potentially sell them off further down the line, potentially, right? Grow them, sell them off. So Arlington Capital, who's a partner of ours, we've worked with a lot of their portfolio. They had Blue Halo, who we have case studies on. They just sold Blue Halo to Aero Environment. right? And so when you're looking at CMMC solutions and you're looking through those two different lenses, your approach is going to be very different for both of those, right? So if you're doing a holding company, PE, investment backed, then you're likely going to want to build a CMMC environment that stays with that organization, right? So like that certification would then travel with them, right? Whereas if you're Alaska Native owned, if you're, Native American, you're likely you might lean more towards a shared service model where at the top level, you're servicing all of these separate legal entities for all of their CMMC needs, or at least a lot of them, right? And so because you don't plan to sell off those organizations, you don't really care or worry about a cert traveling with them outside of your organization, right? Because you want to keep them for as long as you can. So anyways, that was the week. A lot of those conversations on both sides of the aisle, right? Whether it was, do I do a shared service if I plan to keep the business? Do I do a shared service if I plan to sell off the business later on? Anyways, very interesting. Two very different approaches, similar style model, but two different outcomes. So anyways.
Awesome. Well, hey, talk about blast from the past on talking about Summit 7's birthday. Charlie Snyder is here. About the time that Summit 7 would have been a year old, Charlie Snyder was one of the first E6s that I worked for at my first duty station in the Navy. So he remembers me as E3 Seaman Horn running around being like, I can't find my paperwork. What time do I have to be at work? I locked myself out of the vault.
Were you clean shaven back then, Jacob?
Oh yeah.
You're
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a picture on LinkedIn that floats around every Veterans Day. So stay tuned for that, I guess.
Like and subscribe.
Patreon exclusive. Anyways, so okay. Oh boy, Scott, we were talking about this earlier. Just so happens that this week we did the podcast catching up on our Back to Basics DFARS cyber series of covering in all the basics of all the DFARS clauses and provisions, 7008, 7012, 7019, 7020. By the time CMMC is done and the 48 CFR rule is out, there's going to be 7 different, which is a great number, right? 7 different clauses and provisions that all orbit around this idea of you have cybersecurity obligations to implement. And I got a DM, a real life DM. I literally woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and checked my DMs like I do every day. And somebody said, hey, who's the best CMMC lawyer that you know?
Oh my, that's a red flag.
Oh boy. Yeah. So this person was helping a company, and I guess back in, I think 2022 it was, they uploaded a score to SPRS around, I'm changing numbers here to protect the innocent. So like around a 40 to 50 or something like that. And they never did anything else, right? We've talked about this on the stream before, sure. Daniel. Happens all the time. A couple years go by, and now they're up for contract renewal. And I think maybe back in March, they brought in this consultant to say, hey, we got to get ready for CMMC, blah, blah, blah. They ran their mock assessment to figure out what was implemented, and their score was actually closer to like negative 150, right? Which tends to be, I mean, that delta of like 100 to 200 points is what we see consistently, right?
Tales old as time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the DIBCAT came out and said that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they have reports on it, right? What, 57 to, or 52 to negative 57 or something like that?
Yep. Yeah. So this one went from like 40 to 50 to like negative 150, right? Ooh. And this consultant was telling apparently the CFO specifically, who was clearly the decision maker, like, you have to fix this. Do not sleep on this. This is a massive problem. You got to update this score, blah, blah, blah. And according to the DM that I got, they were adamant, the leadership team, no one's going to care about this. We're never going to get assessed. Like, we're just checking the box. It's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out that the contract officer from the DoD said, hey, you put in a score of like 50, and you said that by the end of that year, 3 years ago, your POAM was going to be closed out. So one, can you provide us the paperwork that says that that score was real? And 2, can you provide us some proof that your POAMs are closed out and that you now have a 110? We'd love to give you this work. So just send that over and
We'll
we
send you a
can get on with
contract.
it. And that's about the time that
Gosh.
the DMs started shooting out, being like, do you know a good attorney? And so I posted this, and there have been some algorithmic changes on LinkedIn recently, as there often are. And so engagement fluctuates, right? I mean, this is what I've been doing for years. So, but this post absolutely exploded. And it was crazy to me because the numbers that I put in the post are not the real numbers, obviously. But people were messaging me from DIB contractors going, are you talking about us? And I was like, whoa, like, so it was absolutely wild. And just to remind everybody, right, there's like a ton of comments, people are sharing this post everywhere, and everyone's saying CMMC is real, CMMC has teeth, CMMC is here, don't sleep on CMMC. This has nothing to do with CMMC. This has everything to do with DFARS 7019 and DFARS 7020. Now, they are closely related. They use the same scoring system, and they're both assessments of the same requirements and blah, blah, blah. But this is not teeth involving CMMC. This is the DoD for a contract renewal at this point, probably months before CMMC goes out into any contract, let alone contract renewals, which are later on in the phased rollout. And so it's absolutely real. And I had multiple attorneys message me when they saw this post going, we just talked about this at an internal meeting. I was just at an ABA, an American Bar Association conference, and we had a breakout session with a story like this. Companies are messaging me being like, are you talking about us right now? And all I could think of was like, this is all you need to know about the state of readiness in the DIB for, 1, how well self-attestation works, 2, that the DoD, we've heard this from primes, Daniel, we've talked about this. They're actively being like, can you prove this is true? And that means that the upcoming reckoning for CMMC is just going to be even more of this same story, right?
Yes.
Here's the gotcha there. They're definitely asking if their companies are ready, specifically their critical supply chain. So we've heard a lot of companies that have not heard from their primes, which is not a great thing
sign
to actually hear. You need to then be proactive in that relationship because they are not deeming you critical enough to validate that you're going to have your cert. And
that's a great point because as far as I can tell, right, everybody was happy, right? They had the contract, they had the work, they're going about their business, they're doing their thing, and they didn't hear anything about it until it was contract renewal time. And now they're screwed. Now they're out of time. So there was no like warning sign. There was no indicator. It was just, they're just doing their thing, and then they're coming up for renewal, and they go, you said right here that this is what it was going to be. And this gets back to what we talked about at CS2 Reston and what we heard about at Seek West, where James Gillooly from the DoD got up there. We've heard Stacy say this. We've heard Katie say this. We've heard DibCAC say this, where when DFARS 7019 and 7020 came out and they said, upload your scores to SPRS and tell us when you plan to close out your POAM dates, people would put closeout dates for like 2099, the year 3000, right? And so it's just bonkers. And every time I hear anecdotes like this, I always say these ironically are the reason why a program like CMMC continues to be justified, because the DoD has a million stories like this. And so obviously the status quo isn't working, but I was not expecting that post to blow up. And it got everybody's attention. So maybe go check that out. We have the resource, right? I think even, let's see, who was it? Priceless Pancake was saying they love this Back to Basics series. So we'll have the one on 7020, 7021, and 7009, which a lot of people don't talk about. We'll have those coming up on the channel. So thanks for the feedback, Priceless Pancake. If you have,
you were talking about the state of readiness in the DIB as a whole. Let's look at the scoreboard for a second. The estimate is that there's 80,000 companies that have to get certified, right?
Yeah.
80,000.
Yep.
If you take out service providers and C3PAOs from the current certification list, we're seeing it about 100. That is 0.1% of the total DIB.
Yeah.
0.1%. Scoreboard's not looking great right now. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I brought this up the other day, and Scott, what do you think? Because somebody hears that number, right? 100 certified DIB, people in the DIB supply chain. They're like, oh, that number's so low. Like the DoD can't seriously continue on with CMMC if there's only 100 people certified. At what point do you think, how many people have to get certified for people to wake up and realize, oh, this isn't going away? It's starting to gain critical mass. Do you think there's a number that people are like, once it hits 500, I know it's serious and the DoD is not going to get rid of the program?
I think it's confirmation bias, whichever side you're on.
I think you're right.
I mean, I don't know that there is a number because people are going to think what they want to think, regardless of the reality on the ground.
It's true.
I mean, it's so there's so much confirmation bias going on out there right now.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a company, a very small construction company, and they were like, we've been signing contracts for years. I said, oh, okay. Do you have this thing called DFARS 7012? And they absolutely have CUI based on what they were telling me. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, but we're trying to do CMMC. I was like, okay, great. And I was going through the story of how many certifications there are out there. Oh, it's not going to be serious. But we're not responsible for the things that we signed that just had 7012 in it, right? We're just responsible for the new CMMC stuff, right?
Oh my.
And again, it was confirmation bias, right? Like, hey, I don't think it's really going to happen. But on the other side, I had to pull up my false claims penalty, who writes the check and who has to wear orange jumpsuits kind of thing. And then they immediately ended the call and said, we need to go seek inside counsel and we'll be back. FYI, they have not been back for a conversation since then. So anyways, that's just kind of both sides. People are still like confirmation bias. Oh, only a couple hundred or only 100 have been certified. That's not really going to happen. But we're not really that liable or exposed for all the existing CUI we have, right? And the answer is yes, you're very much exposed. You are open kimono opportunity for the Department of Justice. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
All I would say is, the companies that are certified, it's going to be shooting fish in a barrel for getting contracts. I mean, it's just going to be, those companies are going to blow up.
Yeah. We so next week, the podcast next week is going to be it's next week. I can't remember what the schedule is, but we're going to talk to Fernando Machado at CyberSec Investments. So this month, CMMC is officially 6 months old. It's been in effect for 6 whole months. And wow. Fernando's company by themselves have done 25 CMMC assessments. So we had him on the podcast a couple months ago. So we're going to be talking to him about what they've seen, patterns they've seen, indicators that people are going to pass, not pass, stuff like that. Cool. So, but yeah, at this point, CMMC's been in effect for 6 months. So,
and we're sitting at 28. We got 28.
Right? We just got 28 as of this morning.
Yeah. It's really happening for sure. All right, let's get into some questions here that we had queued up. Okay. So this is actually from a topic that I was talking about in a bunch of posts about 3 months ago. I think we briefly covered it on the Q&A. Do all CUI assets need to have updated operating systems / firmware? We have a lot of specific printers. It's always printers, right? We have a lot of specific printers that are out of service. I think maybe out of support is what they meant here. It would cost us millions right now. That sounds like there are probably some hyper specialized printers or something.
Yeah, it's a lot of printers.
Engineering firms and stuff have like big plotters and things like that. Okay, so it would cost us millions right now rather than over time like we originally planned. Okay, as it is currently written, NIST SP 800-171 Revision 2 and the CMMC Assessment Guide, which is aligned to NIST SP 800-171 Revision 2, the requirements for flaw remediation, which is the one that everybody points to, does not require you to update out of service components, right? People are filling in the blanks with what is usually the best advice, right? That's what people would normally always do. It's what people ought to do. But they are filling in the blanks of what was taken out of the 853 control used to create this requirement. And so if you dig into the corresponding 853 control that they used to create 3.14.1, you will find that flaw remediation and patches / updates are different things. And they specifically point to a NIST publication, on patch management. And there's a whole section in that document that talks about how you can remediate flaws for components and for items in your system that are not supported by patch management. Because the question to ask yourself is, what happens if the patches aren't available?
Yep.
Right? This is not a requirement, and the corresponding control from which it is derived that says you must replace unsupported components, which brings me to my next point. NIST SP 800-171 revision 3 will require you to replace unsupported system components, because there is a different requirement that stems from a different 853 control. I believe the 853 control is 316.1 or 316.2. It's literally called unsupported system components. And that comes from a different control family in 853. That one will require you to. So as it's written right now, not technically required to upgrade these things if they are out of support, but you do need a plan for getting there, because 171 Rev 3 is coming, and CMMC 3.0, if you will assess to verify that you have done that.
Yeah, and for those of us who were here back in 2020, 2019, the original CMMC 1.0 had the requirement, right?
Yep.
And it was removed out of the Delta 20.
Yes.
So when they pulled the Delta 20, that requirement disappeared with it. So, yeah, best practice for sure, but not in R2.
And this, I love this example, because I know that, like, if you follow me on LinkedIn and if you've seen me anywhere, I absolutely love going, actually, that's not what the requirement says. But in this case, it isn't just an annoying, it's not the annoying comic book guy from The Simpsons just trying to make a point. It literally, if you read the requirements closely and you have the desire and the need to adjudicate these things specifically, it could potentially save you millions of dollars based off of what you're doing for your strategy around what the requirements say, what the requirements actually require, and everything else involved. So you definitely need a plan. You definitely should have components that are still in service, but there are obviously constraints that happen. There are ways to mitigate system flaws that do not involve upgrading, ripping, and replacing things that are out of support. But eventually that requirement will be in there. So
yeah, this has come up with customers, when it comes to things like Windows 11 upgrades as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Windows 10 is going out of support here very, very shortly. We've only got a couple months left of Windows 10, and so we're moving people to Windows 11. And when we were first having the conversation, a while ago about it, and I was like, man, I thought that this was in the requirement set that you had to be on supported components. And just like Jacob said, we walked through the requirement set, and it's not there. But it's still a very good best practice. Certainly not 100. Something that you want to ignore, but it's not there in black and white.
And I think a lot of people go ahead, Jacob.
I was gonna say, it just shows the irony of going from 1.0 to 2.0, because it was a requirement.
Yeah.
And we took it out because nobody liked CMMC. And then now we have this one, and then we're going to put it back in. And so we're right back where we started in 2020, 6 or 7 years later, whenever we get to CMMC 3.0. So
there was a lot of good stuff in the Delta.
Oh, yeah.
That we should
DNS filtering,
email controls. I mean, there was,
DKIM, DMARC. Yeah.
So, but one day we'll get there one day, but this is also why it's very important to vet the people you are going to use as a C3PAO and get a sanity check. Because if you find somebody who is a hardline stance on interpretations like this, then maybe you should shop around a little bit to find somebody who agrees with what's actually written in the requirements.
I need to add some flavor to this. So the discussion of that control states things like patch management, hot fixes, antivirus signature updates. I think everyone needs to have a clear understanding. The discussion is not prescriptive.
Correct.
Saying you have to do these things. I think that's where the huge disconnect is you have to show meeting these. The discussion is there to give you some ideas on what could be seen as meeting these. It's not saying you have to do all of these things. I do want to make that clear to people.
This is why I know people don't like 853, but I cannot stress this enough. when NIST tailored 853 down to 800-171, they cut out a lot of information that explains what the requirement is talking about. And if you look at the control in 853 that this requirement is derived from, correcting system flaws and updating systems are separate control items, which means they are not the same thing. They are distinctly different things. And if you dig into the NIST documentation around patch management, you'll see what they're talking about. But when we lose that level of granularity in the 800-171 requirement, we apply what should be best practice most of the time and our subjective interpretation of the requirement. And that's not what it's actually saying. This is why I get after Ron Ross and Vicky and NIST all the time. I mean, you guys remember when they were doing the revision for 171 Rev 3, I spent hours and hours and hours of content being like, tailoring is the key. Tailoring is the key. They have to be very specific with their language. Otherwise, it leaves open doors like this. And it could potentially cost companies millions now rather than, spreading that out over time. So, very, very important to pay close attention. But technically, as of right now, 171 Rev 2, CMMC as written, that is not the requirement. So there you go. All righty.
Joyce is out here. Dreaded printers. I agree with you, Joyce.
Oh, yeah.
Scott and I think, being in the IT side of the house for very many years, phone systems and printers were always my nemesis. Scott, I don't know what yours were, but those two,
printers
just
are terrible
with all the time.
Printers are terrible.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
And I was so happy. I was so happy when we moved to DocuSign and got away from physical signing and printing and scanning documents. Oh my God.
Well, and our quote template back then was black and red. So what those printers would just eat all of the ink every time we would have to print something off for signature.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So funny. And I think this is often a lot of times in your calls, Daniel, this is one of the main things that comes up when people go, we just want a push button VDI solution. And then one of your first questions is always like, do you ever have to print stuff? And then that immediately throws a wrench in the gears because now your data flow is different.
Because IT people don't think about printing because that's how terrible it actually is. They're like, nah, we just need a cloud enclave. And I'm like, have you asked your users if they print? No, we probably
users.
Yeah. Ooh.
All right. Enough lamenting printers. We'll have a therapy session for everybody later on. Okay. Question via DMs this morning. The DMs are full of gems this week. Any idea how DIBCAC selects the lucky winners for free assessment? So, like we talked about in the podcast this week, the DoD assessment methodology that you see in your paperwork as DFARS provision 252-204-7019 and clause 7020 outlined 3 different levels of assessment: basic assessment, medium assessment, and high assessment. Basic assessments are assessments that you conduct yourself. You calculate your score according to the DODAM methodology, you upload it to SPRS, and then you maintain that score accurately over time, right? All the other assessments, the medium and the high, are conducted by the government. Specifically, the high assessment is conducted by a DIBCAC audit team via the criteria in 171A, just like you would conduct your internal assessment against 171A, just like CMMC would conduct an assessment via a C3 PAO that you have hired against 171A. These are often referred to as a DIBCAC high assessment. They're pretty rare. These are not the same thing as joint surveillance assessments. That was a series of assessments prior to the 32 CFR CMMC program rule going into effect in December of 2024. That was a Band-Aid solution where you could sign up for a joint surveillance assessment that was conducted by a C3 PAO for CMMC status because it was done jointly with the DIBCAC team. And so if you met the threshold score, then when the rule goes into effect, you'd be grandfathered in to the CMMC program. DIBCAC showing up at your company, knocking on your door and saying, we'd like to conduct an assessment against NIST SP 800-171A for your environment is a totally different beast. This is totally out of their purview, pursuant to 7019 and 7020. And there are essentially, as far as I have heard and as far as I can tell, only 2 reasons why they show up. One, they don't believe your score that you have uploaded in SPRS. Typically, if you have a perfect score in SPRS, ironically,
Red flag.
it's a red flag, and they don't believe you. Apparently, lots of fluctuations in scores over time can change things. Like big swings, positive to negative, can potentially get their attention. The more important one to me personally is these are not assigned by random lottery. DIBCAC has very limited resources. And as far as we've been able to tell from statements of the DoD, the DIBCAC team shows up to assess companies that the department really cares about. And in the anecdotes that I've heard and talked to with companies, most of the companies that get a DIBCAC high are pretty high speed companies doing some pretty cool stuff that the department really super duper cares about. And that's a good indicator that you will need CMMC level 3, not just CMMC level 2, which, as I hope you would know, is a massive jump in cost, requirements, complexity, support. I mean, Scott, you can probably talk about,
Oh yeah.
just our, I mean, this is what we specialize in, and our service offerings to match level 3 are quite a bit different, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if you just take the government numbers, we're not even going to talk about real life. Let's just take the government numbers. The government says that it's going to be a $2.8 million implementation cost for level 3. That's what the government says it's going to cost.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. So how do they assign it? They think that there's something afoot in your scoring, or they really super duper care about what you're working on. And so if you have had a DIBCAC high assessment in the past, I hope your math was mathing, and I hope that you are prepared for CMMC level 3, because that's a good reason. You should ask them when they show up, why are you here? Am I free to go? I'm not discussing my day. But you should ask them, why are they there? Because they can probably tell you that it's priority decision, I would hope. I don't know how transparent they are these days.
Those first time submission of 110 is highly suspicious.
Yeah.
Very.
So there you go. All right, let's see here.
I was chatting back and forth on a LinkedIn post a couple weeks ago, and tagged Stacy Balshanik in it and said, "Hey, Stacy, like, is it fair to assume CMMC level 3 would center around critical technology? So DoD critical technology?" She's like, "Yes." And your point, Jacob, historically has been, if you're under a DIBCAC high assessment, chances are you're likely going to be CMMC level 3 required down the line. So with those tied together, if you're in critical technology, which DoD has a full website on it, and you've gone through a DIBCAC high assessment, you're on the list position for level 3. So
it's a very strong indicator for sure. Yeah. Okay. Dana Dog is here. Always here every week. Love seeing you. He says, talking about patching, I am hearing different answers about using third-party patching solutions. For instance, if the tool is cloud hosted, does it have to be FedRAMP if it's installing an agent?
No. So if you're just doing patch management and its job is to do discovery on that system, right? Oh, you're out of date. Let me push a new patch. They're not collecting CUI as part of that. That would fall under security protection data.
Yep.
The cloud provider does not have to be FedRAMP. The CMMC L2 scoping guidance under security protection makes all of that very clear. And so no, but there are, and this is the gotcha, there are a lot of patching tools that do more than just patching.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking at like Ninja RMM, Kaseya, ConnectWise, like, SolarWinds, and patching's a component, sure, that piece is likely not going to ever do CUI, therefore not have to be FedRAMP. But if it can do file transfers, if it's doing any kind of EDR, if it's doing screen share, screen capture, those other type of mechanisms, then yes, you could drift into that having to be a FedRAMP cloud provider. So just patch management isolated by itself, I cannot see a world in which that would ever need to be FedRAMP. But if it's part of a Swiss Army knife tool, then you're leaning towards a probability of CUI could be, and FedRAMP would then be in place.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Bruce is here. He says, how do you feel about multi-function printers that magically email out of the company? Oh my God. This is
My recommendation, have a DLP tool that does OCR and that is scanning the heck out of that document for CUI.
I don't want my car talking to the internet. I don't want my refrigerator and my washing machine talking to the internet. I don't want my printer to send emails. I'm a crotchety old man these days. I'm like, stop it. I don't want it.
I don't want to get it out of here.
So yeah, I mean, we just moved, and it seems like, so we, made some updates to the house that we moved into. Everything is connected to the internet. It's crazy. I think I have like 7 apps on my phone now to control various things in my house. It's insane.
And a very robust firewall probably at that.
Oh my God. I seriously am. I think I'm actually going, and I haven't actually talked to our team about this yet, but I am considering having our pen test team pen test my house.
Because man, this would be great content. I'm writing this down.
It scares the crap out of me.
Honestly, the DoD should do that as like an MTV Cribs type of a thing. They show up. They show up to do the assessments for random companies. I still want to see an undercover boss from the DoD, from the CMMC PMO, show up to random contractors.
Working from home is not as safe as you think it is. It's that kind of thing.
All right, everybody's getting their feelings out about printers. Priceless says, I was happy when we said we would not print CUI. I still have printers in the closet just in case. Patrick said, just declare a paperless company. Woohoo, problem solved. There you go. We don't print by policy. There you go. All right, let's see here. I thought someone made a statement that a manufactured part would potentially be considered CUI. Are physical parts in the real world considered to be CUI themselves? I don't know if you've seen this come up in conversations, Daniel.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at DFARS 7013, a lot of it's talking about detailed manufacturing specification, engineering type files, things like that. However, if you're actually making the part, if you're making components for a missile, although it might not be clearly stated that the hardware itself is CUI, it's a derivative of the drawings that you had to build the part. Yes, you only want authorized users accessing that, so the users would be in scope because the part has been materialized, especially if it's ITAR. Most things are controlled technical information, right? So it's like that's tagged with export control, which also has requirements around U.S. persons, sovereignty, and things like that for the actual pieces as well, unless you have an export control license.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Scott,
would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the whole USML, for ITAR, all of that, the majority of it is physical components.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's about don't ship this component to a, foreign country.
Things that go, what is it? Bang, boom, and encrypt are the three.
The whiz bang stuff.
That's right. The classic whiz bangers,
as we used to make fun of DoD for saying. All right. Somebody says, has anyone else had trouble getting their DoD contract connections to tell you what CUI is? Brother,
I haven't. You know what they say?
Pull up a chair. I believe that this was a question that was on a Reddit thread the other day, and the top comment was,
"Oh yeah, I saw this.
You would have better luck finding out who shot Kennedy than finding out what your CUI is." So he said, "Has anybody else had trouble doing this, if any, for your contracts? It seems that even on the DoD side, there is some confusion. I think it's got cut off, or lack of understanding, is what they say here."
I think that would be an understatement.
I think a few people have experienced this issue. Daniel, I don't know if you hear about this in your calls.
I hear about it all the time. People are like, especially, here's what I have found out. The DoD is fairly friendly to the primes to an extent, right? So they'll have a CDRL, CDRL, contract data requirements list. They'll have data specification. They'll have a little bit more info. If they receive that information as a prime, it is pretty much never disseminated downstream. They just say everything is CUI. So the DoD might be friendly to the prime. The primes are not as friendly to the subs, is what I have seen. And so are things CUI is the number one question I get on calls, because people are trying to not be in scope for CMMC level 2 specifically, which I completely understand. However, your primes are not going to wake up overnight and change their behavior, because one contracting officer at a prime level cannot figure out who's going to be sending data to you. They don't have a list of the hundreds of thousands of people that you could be communicating with, right? And so they don't have any control, which means that they're going to do a little bit of CYA themselves and put the requirement in proactively to cover themselves for the sake of corporate risk. So long story short, should you know what you're doing as CUI or not? Absolutely. Should the prime and should the DoD be communicating that significantly better than they are? Absolutely. But they're not going to change overnight. And if you want to keep the work you're doing, and I hate to sound like this, but it's just the reality of what we're facing. If you want to keep the work that you're doing today, you're going to have to bow down with the corporate risk assumption that your prime is making and get that certification or get that 100% self-attestation. Whatever they're forcing you to do, likely edging on the side of certification at this point from what we've heard. I wish there was a better answer. It's not going to solve the CUI problem. They're still going to overmark or undermark or just not mark at all. But corporately, from am I going to lose business? You have to side on DoD's not changing, primes aren't changing. Get the things that are going to be required of you through your private contract with them and move on with life. And I hate to be that much of a Debbie Downer, but that's the reality of it.
Yeah, I think if they were going to change their behavior, we would have seen it by now. I mean, everybody talks about how long this process has taken. That's also a lot of years that have gone by where they haven't changed the behavior. So I wouldn't count on some massive change all of a sudden.
They're trying. There are courses and there are efforts within things like Defense Acquisition University to try and teach, people within the acquisition community about CUI and properly marking and, putting it in contracts appropriately. But that is going to take years, decade of continuous training for it to make a significant impact on, the behavior in the ecosystem. It's just not going to happen overnight.
It is a huge ship to turn, right? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people going through education for a very long time. And supposedly they've been doing it since the CUI program was released back in
2016 is when the federal CUI program officially went into effect. So I can tell you a couple things on this topic here of the CUI part. One,
by the way, Jacob, your screen's black.
Yep, everything's fine. No one panic. Everything's under control.
Okay.
So you can still hear me fine. So like we were talking about on the podcast this week for 7019, when you mentioned people are trying to get out of CMMC through scoping decisions, it's very clear as we move into the other provisions and clauses, 7019, 7020, and so on, that those things kick in when you are required to comply with 7012. So it all orbits back around this question of, do you need to do the things in 7012? And that fundamentally is a question of the nature of the data that you may or may not have. And that's where things start to get complicated because, like people are saying in the chat, that's a question that isn't necessarily a CMMC problem. It isn't necessarily a DFARS 7012 problem. It's the customer conversation with what's going on. Terry said, the information we get from the government is crap. It's not always the prime's fault.
That's true.
I would echo this because I'm married to a brilliant cybersecurity engineer who runs massive development programs at a very large mega prime, and she interfaces with government program managers all the time, every day, and they have this conversation all the time. Are you sending us CUI? And the government says everything we send you is CUI, and typically that's true. The government, the information that the government is sending to Raytheon and Northrop and Lockheed, almost all of it in that form is CUI. And so the problem is that once it goes from the prime down to you, the prime has to make the decision, is it still CUI or not? And so when you go from the supply chain people that you're interfacing with to the program offices at the prime, to their customers at the government, the string of answers is always, it's all CUI, it's all CUI, it's all CUI. So the odds of them deviating from that for your specific situation are just astronomically small.
Yeah. Yep. Terry had another really good comment down there about the CUI program being about data. And can you pull that one up real quick?
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah. So that's a great comment, Terry. You know, the data about those components would be CUI, but the component itself is not, because you're right. The CUI program is about data. So that's a really good call out, I think.
And CUI can only be CUI if it's on behalf of a federal contract. ITAR can exist outside of a contract.
Yeah, it can exist outside of a contract as well.
So you are right, Jerry. ITAR and export control are governed independent of federal contracts, but can be part, and they're therefore kind of make the transition to both CUI and export control collectively, but they can be divorced. And do I see a Mrs. Horn in the comments?
Listen, we're not in the normal studio. We're making things happen. There's people walking around behind me. I specifically put it on the calendar and said, it's stream time at 10 a.m. There's doors opening behind me. Sorry, everybody. I'll tell you what, you know who absolutely loves getting connection requests and engagement on LinkedIn? My beautiful, intelligent wife, Shauna. So make sure you go find her on LinkedIn, everybody, and tell them that we sent you.
I love it. And I love that she calls you Jake, by the way.
It's a whole, oh my God, this is off the rails. My secret identity is being compromised.
I've been exposed.
Somebody did make a good point about the FAR CUI rule. Amongst all of the things about the FAR CUI rule, the standard form that the FAR CUI rule creates should help this problem tremendously.
Yeah,
because
I got my fingers crossed right here.
Oh man, please,
come on, FAR.
A standardized form that says, does this involve CUI? Yes. If yes, which type of CUI does it involve? We're trying to run a show here. We're trying to run a show here. Okay. All right. Back to the questions. Okay. Somebody said, per your webcasts, I'm reaching out seeking a list of those CMMC CUI contract search terms, clauses, regulations, policies, which I should be searching for in my contracts. So is there such a list, Daniel?
There is. So I probably, through all the recorded things that we've done, the Jacob Hill podcast I did, this morning I got a LinkedIn message with this exact request. It probably happens about every 3 days I get a message about this. So feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I will gladly send you the Summit 7 blog on how to run it and the list of the keywords, and then you can start doing some investigation. I will say this. Think very hard before you run this. Because the more you know.
Once you know, you know.
Yes. Once you know, you can't unknow. So, you know.
This is a category of things called information hazards, where once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. This is like, oh, it'll be super fun to do 23andMe results around the Thanksgiving table. And you're like, be very careful about what we're about to open in this envelope.
Yes. So yes, feel free to message me. But again, just be cautious and probably have some level of approval before you open that's a corporate risk envelope that you're opening.
Yeah,
so,
you almost certainly have more CUI in your environment, and you're probably not as Italian as you think. You know what I mean?
It's been about a 3 to 5x multiplier from what people think like the number of users they think are in scope to what it actually is. So that it's a pretty significant ramp up. Anyways.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Is it true? Oh, speaking of DocuSign, Scott, from earlier, is it true that GCC High is not compatible with Adobe Sign or any SSO integration? Any solutions that are FedRAMP compatible and allow such features as SSO and Power Automate flows, maybe DocuSign?
Yeah, so go ahead. No, go ahead, Daniel.
So SSO, 100%, you can integrate whatever you want, right? There's nothing really different between the commercial and GCC High from that perspective. The ability to do dynamic user provisioning from Intra ID into third-party apps isn't quite in GovCloud the last I checked. But outside of that, single sign-on, you can do that all day in the GovCloud. Adobe Sign inside of, and DocuSign probably is the same way, does have integrations into the Power Platform for signing and certifying documents. The last I checked, that was not in GCC Hive to allow Power Automate to talk to Adobe or DocuSign for part of that workflow. But I will take it as a to-do and figure out if that is now available or not. Because we looked at it a little while ago because people have asked about it.
And they do have, I mean, like DocuSign has a FedRAMP solution.
They do.
So, and I believe Adobe probably does as well. But I mean, that's what we use. And we've been using, I think we integrated the FedRAMP DocuSign solution set in 2019, 2020.
A while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been 5 or 6 years. So yeah, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's the other thing. If GCCI does have an integration, make sure to not use the commercial version if you plan to process, store, or transmit CUI through signature. So I'm looking on their website here, or the Adobe Acrobat Sign for Government FedRAMP Moderate authorized. So Adobe does have a authorized as well. So that's good to know.
There you go. All right. Somebody said, do I need a penetration test for CMMC Level 2? No, you do not. You do for CMMC Level 3 because it is a requirement in NIST SP 800-172. It is not a requirement in NIST SP 800-171. And unless NIST puts the penetration testing control into the 853 Rev 6 moderate baseline, there is no chance that penetration testing would be a CMMC Level 2 requirement, because only the controls in the 853 moderate baseline can have the potential to show up in the 800-171 requirement set, even though being in the moderate baseline is not a guarantee that it will be in there. Until that day happens, it will only be a CMMC Level 3 requirement. So when NIST starts talking about 53 Rev 6 tailoring, which I will be doing backflips when that happens because it's my favorite thing to talk about. That will be the signal. Is if it goes into the moderate baseline, then that's like boop, boop, warning. That could potentially be a future requirement, but it is not. It is not currently.
Just because it's not a requirement doesn't mean it's not a good idea.
Yes, absolutely.
Patch the things if you can. Pen test if you can. Yeah.
If you're like Scott and you love having apps and IoT devices all over your house, then yeah, it's a good idea. Technically not required though.
And maybe back something up every now and then. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Crazy
Absolutely.
thought.
Okay. I mean, kind of breaking news in the last, day or so. DibNet is dead, apparently, Scott.
Yeah. Matt Titcomb posted about this on LinkedIn this morning. That was my tip off that this had happened with the email that came out. DibNet is no longer functional. They have taken it offline. New process. You may or may not have gotten the email. I think only people that were subscribed to DICE, I think. DC3?
DibCS participants.
Okay. DibCS participants got it. So that's not everybody in the DIB, right? And so, DibNet is dead.
Yeah. So this is important because per DFARS 7012, you have incident reporting obligations to hold within 72 hours and blah, 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 all that stuff. Check out the podcast, like and subscribe for a detailed breakdown of 7012 and its obligations. The way that you would normally report that is through the DibNet portal, and there's a whole, deal of making an account. Oh, great. Yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you, Daniel, for the B-roll here while we explain how it's supposed to work. You still have an obligation to report these incidents, even though the DibNet portal is no longer with us. And now apparently the process is that you submit the report and it gives you an XML file that you have to then download and then send to the DoD, I believe.
Email it.
Is the new process. Okay.
Or DoD safe, yeah.
Yes, so you are still required to report these incidents within 72 hours. It's just now got more steps. The story that's out there is that this is a cost-cutting measure. So great. That's wonderful. Cool. So there you go. So if you haven't got
another process for people not to follow, that's all it is. I mean, not that anybody's reporting anyways. I mean, we're going to be honest. Like, very few people are actually doing the reports. So
yeah, this is probably the biggest, probably potentially biggest, most impactful change to incident reporting in the DIB since reporting obligations were created, and 90% of the DIB probably has no idea that it would happen because they never went to DibNet in the first place. So it just there's a lot of ironic levels to what's going on here. But yeah, if you experience an incident and you need to report, just know that it's going to take you some more steps at this point for what is actually going on. Okay.
So Priceless Pancake is over here risking a lashing. Oh my gosh.
Man. Get him, Jacob, get him.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Listen.
I'm going to sit up in my seat for this.
It's Friday. We only got 5 minutes left, so I won't belabor the point here. We can talk about it afterwards. Message me on DM. The long and short of it, my position, you know what? I'm not even going to do it. It's fine. It's fine. We'll table this one for next time. There's still questions we got to get to. I disagree, but there's reasons why I would disagree. But yeah, things like this don't help this type of perception, right? Like things like this fuel the idea that compliance isn't. If you had said that 20 minutes ago, then I would have hijacked this whole conversation.
Yeah, so. Scott and I just would have exited the chat and just let Jacob have the rest of the live stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see here. Okay, somebody said, when will DoD start the phased rollout? As of right now, everything we know, our prediction is that's going to be sometime September, October timeframe for when the phased rollout will start. If you've been following our content for a while, we've said that the window for the publication of the 48 CFR CMMC final rule, the thing that will codify the CMMC contract clause itself to enable DoD to start inserting it into contracts, should be published. This is what we've been saying, June to October. We're now in June, so we're now in that window. But the next big milestone in that process is for DoD to send the final rule over to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, which is a component of the Office of Management and Budget. This is the standard way that rulemaking works. That regulatory review process takes up to typically 90 days, and then it has to go back to the department for more red tape and signatures. And so when you add up all these numbers and then you sort of move this sliding window around, I personally think that it's going to be in October. Stacy at Seek West said she thinks it's going to be September. I put in a poll, and a lot of people think October on LinkedIn. So it's going to be somewhere around that time frame for when that phased rollout will begin. That's when we'll start seeing CMMC requirements in contracts, and that's when it hits the fan, as you might say, because it's impossible to predict what the requirements will be in which contracts from which customers for which companies. So I hope that everybody's prepared, because we're just going to have to see how it plays out at that point.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
Mileage may vary.
The phased rollout, your mileage may vary. All right, let's see here.
That's a bumper sticker for us right there.
No, that's hilarious. Producer Dustin's got to make a note of that one. Okay. Has anybody used Intune for managing Macs and being able to enforce CMMC controls? Has anyone tried using Jamf Pro plus Intune?
Great question. So on the Jamf piece, I've heard great things from Jamf. I think we trialed it a very long time ago.
We did, yeah.
The two major gotchas, well, really one huge gotcha, is the application allowed deny listing, right? So Intune doesn't have a means to do that on Macs. I believe that Jamf does, from what I have heard through rumors. I think it's definitely worth investigating that if you have a lot of Macs in the environment. Mm-hmm. The nice part about Intune, and this is kind of where it gets to like authorized devices under 3.1.1, the compliance profile that when you join a Mac to GCC High, you have the ability to authorize that device, where if the compliance policy changes the compliance state, like somebody turns off encryption, they can't access the Microsoft cloud anymore. So I would definitely look at potentially an overlap between the two to get kind of that full Swiss Army knife there.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely. All right, Terry said regarding DibNet being dead, dead as a doornail, DibNet, everybody loves a good alliteration. Said, I talked to the CIO office this morning and I was told they are modernizing. This is just a step moving in that direction. I hope the next step is posted quickly. Me too.
Agreed.
Nothing modernized. Nothing says modernizing like going backwards. So yeah, I hope they get around to it pretty quickly for sure. Okay, wrapping up here. Nicholas said, do we know an approximate fail rate of CMMC assessments? or frequency of C3POs saying at phase 1 the OSC is not ready? No, we don't. The frequency of companies not making it out of phase 1 pre-assessment readiness review is something that we have labeled over time a false start, right? And so we clocked this early on, being like, there's not going to be a lot of CMMC failures because the companies that are able to make it through pre-assessment review are more likely to pass. There's just going to be a bunch of companies that pass and a bunch of companies that you just don't qualify for assessment, and you won't hear about it. So we have said that, you know, we would like this to be a metric that is put out there, because it would be very helpful for the DoD to be like, most of you are not ready for an assessment, and we know that because most of you can't make it out of phase 1. But as far as I know, this is not an official metric that they track. We asked them about this at CS2 Reston, and the AB doesn't track it. The DoD doesn't track it. So as far as we know, it's just based off anecdotes. And,
now I can tell you what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, and I'm having these conversations with the with clients that have started an assessment, and it's gone off the rails. They've converted them to mock assessments. So I guess people are getting into their assessment. The C3PO is like, listen, guy, listen, gal, like, y'all are screwed. We're converting this to a mock assessment. And so they'll convert on paper to a full mock because of how bad it is.
I think that we've got Fernando coming on here before too long, right?
Yeah.
For a talk. This would be a great conversation to have with him, because I know that, you know, in my conversations with him, he's finished 25. He's got 25 that they have done, right? He has more than a few that he has basically unscheduled and opened up slots on his schedule because they couldn't get out of the phase 1, right? And so he just dropped them and moved them out and said, you're not ready. And it opened up a slot for another company to get assessed. So
one of my favorite conversations at CS2 this year was an assessor came up to me and said, they're like, true story. They called to schedule their assessment, and they said, and we asked, where's your documentation, which is phase 1, Scott, right? Like, give us your documentation. And they said, oh, yeah, we don't have any. Just come on site. Our guys know everything. You can just interview them and we'll be fine. That was real. And so I beg of you, if you're in the chat, if you are listening under the sound of my voice, this is a public document. It's now on the DoD CIO's website, per the request at CS2 this year. The CMMC assessment process, read what will be expected of you, because I think there's a huge disconnect. They think it's like ISO, or they think it's like other certifications they've gone in the past where it's more of a conversation. You've got to produce a lot more. So please go read that document before you ever sign up for an actual assessment, and you will save yourself a lot of pain.
Absolutely. Wise words to end the stream. Scott, thanks for stopping by. Stop by anytime. Always welcome. We do this every Friday. Scott, if you weren't aware, everybody, if you weren't aware, we do this every Friday. You can find it on LinkedIn. You can find it on YouTube. You can go to CUIHotline.org and fill out the form. You can call a number. If you find this afterwards, leave a comment if you still have questions or praise, especially when Scott's around, because, you know, we work for Scott here. You can always find us via DMs on LinkedIn. Tons and tons of awesome questions on DMs. No question is too basic or too simple, especially if you guys are new to the ecosystem. I know we have a lot of companies who say that they send their interns or new hires. They tell them to tune into the Q&A all the time. Questions from people who have no idea what's going on are some of the most valuable questions that you can ask, because most people have no idea what's going on. So thanks for sending all your questions. If we didn't get to them, we'll queue them up for next week, and we'll see you on the Q&A same time next Friday. So thanks, everybody.
See you next week. See y'all.